2 balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Urias fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. This is way back. Walk the ball. Chris Taylor.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined tonight by Blake Williams. I apologize to anybody who was hoping to see Matt Moreno hosting yet again, filling in for me yesterday. I regret to inform you that I'm back. I was just on vacation. Blake is here with me. Blake, I always joke these shows are better when they're coming off of a win. We're doing this show off of a pair of losses. We'll get to the Yankees series. We'll get to all sorts of stuff, but I'll start with, how are you doing, my friend?
Doing pretty good. I got the college postseason on, which is why I'm a little bit dressed up for Alabama, and they're up 6-0 last I saw. So the Dodgers didn't win, but at least my Crimson Tide are doing pretty well so far.
Well, and hey, my University of Oregon Ducks, who we will be talking about tonight because there's yet another Oregon Duck on the Los Angeles Dodgers. They beat Vanderbilt yesterday, so I believe they had the day off, waiting to see who they will play in sort of the final stretch of the regionals. But lots to get to tonight. We're, of course, going to talk about the Yankee series. The Dodgers win the first. They end up losing the last two. Today's game in particular, don't worry, there's going to be some Bobby Miller conversations because there needs to be a Bobby Miller conversation after the performance he put up today. We're going to talk starting pitching, Blake. I think that's kind of the biggest headline that we'll get to. What do the Dodgers do with Bobby Miller? What do they do with Michael Grove? And then, of course, what do they do with Noah Syndergaard? We'll get to a Julio Urias update and when he might be returning to the rotation and what that might mean for some of the names we just mentioned. We'll do a little buying or selling of some guys who had either great or terrible months of May. And I'll ask you, Blake, are you buying the upswing or the downswing on these players? We'll talk a little bit about the Trace Thompson injury Jonny DeLuca added. And then, of course, we'll get to some questions. I know we have already got lots of those in our Twitter mentions because we asked for them for folks unable to join us. So lots to get to. So thank you to the folks on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube who are joining us live. We greatly appreciate it. Those listening after the fact on a podcast or watching after the fact on the Dodger Blue YouTube page, we greatly appreciate you. But Blake, let's just start with this series that we just came off of. Yes, just a regular season series, but two of the most iconic franchises, not just in baseball, but I would say in all of sports, playing against one another, the Dodgers and the Yankees. The first inning of the first game was incredible from the Dodgers. Basically, the next, 26 innings that we saw these two teams play advantage Yankees. What did you make of the three games that we just saw?
I mean, I'm not putting a ton of stock into it. It wasn't an ideal series, but the Dodgers have a lot of injuries currently. They're relying on some not key members of the rotation to fill innings right now. I know a lot of their lineup is healthy, and I think the lineup was probably their biggest flaw in this series, but that just kind of happens throughout the ups and downs of a season. It's hard to just take too much away from this at this stage right now. It's a 3-game series. Sometimes losses happen. The Yankees are a good team. I'm just willing to kind of move on and push it to the side, not put too much of anything on it.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out that if you want to make a case for the Dodgers, I mean, I suppose I would have said coming in, they didn't exactly have their front of the rotation starters going in this series, whereas the Yankees were going to see Cole, Severino, who had been really good, and Herman, who had been really good prior to some sticky stuff. So the Yankees rotation kind of set up the way that they probably would have wanted to, whereas I would say the Dodgers didn't necessarily. And again, they won the first one. They lost the second one. The third game was a really close game that, I can see in the comments. You could probably point to individual moments as to why they ended up losing that. I would even argue the second game with Michael Grove, that there was probably a little bit of bad luck as far as sequencing went for Grove and how that game played out. But at the end of the day, the Dodgers lose 2 of 3. As I mentioned in the intro, Blake, let's get into the starting pitching. And let's just start with today's game, Sunday's game. Bobby Miller was on the mound. He had made 2 starts. He had allowed 1 earned run in both of those starts. I would argue that the numbers maybe were slightly better than he deserved. It felt like he worked himself out of some trouble in some spots and maybe wasn't as dominant as the box score looked. And then today happened. And when you look at Bobby Miller's box score, there's a lot to like. I said in the comments, he's living up to the hype. 6 innings, 1 hit, no earned runs, 7 strikeouts against the Yankees, one of the best teams in baseball, even without Aaron Judge. For the Dodgers' number 1 prospect, pitching prospect, to come into the major leagues and now 3 starts against, by the way, 3 very good teams, to have pitched as well as he did, I would say exclamation point today. What have you made of Bobby Miller so far?
is it too early to call him the staff ace? But in all seriousness, Miller has just looked incredible. I think he's blown away expectations from everyone. And I think he's going to be in the running for the Rookie of the Year race by the end of the year. He's making a case for the Dodgers to absolutely keep him in the rotation, which I'm sure we're going to discuss a little bit later. But he just looks like a dominant starter. He looks like he has top of the rotation potential, and he's already showing it. There hasn't been a whole lot of negatives to take away from him in his first 3 starts. And I know it's a tiny sample size, but he just looks like he has the hit factor. And sometimes that's just what you need from a pitcher.
Yeah, I mean, how about this? He actually only threw 9 fastballs today, according to Baseball Savant. Averaged 99.2 miles an hour. He threw 38 sinkers, averaging 98.5 miles an hour. The fastball got up over 100 miles an hour. And then if you look at the swing and miss, he threw 19 sliders, Blake. 11 of them were swung on and missed. He ended up with overall a 33% whiff rate against one of the better offenses in baseball, again, even without Aaron Judge. And this felt like one of those moments where I kind of had the thought in my head, this feels like it's going to be a defining moment. Like I could see the Bobby Miller in 2023 narrative going one of 2 directions. It could have been his come to Jesus moment, his come back to earth moment, where it's like 3 innings, 5 earned runs. And it's like, hey, you know what? He's a rookie. You can't expect him to be this good all the time. Or he was going to play on Sunday Night Baseball against one of the better, more marquee franchises in the sport, and he was going to be dominant. And it turned out to be the latter. You joked on a text message saying, hey, is it too early to start the Rookie of the Year campaign? I went on and looked. When I looked earlier, he was 30-1 to win the National League Rookie of the Year. Those odds are not reasonable. Like, you should be getting all over those odds if you want to throw a little bit down. $5 to win $150. I mean, to me, it's crazy that he's 30-1 for a couple reasons. A, because he had the pedigree. So when he came up, there were going to be built in. He had a head start in life, so to speak, because if he performs well, the hype machine and the narrative is already built in to Bobby Miller. It helps that he throws 100 miles an hour and averages 99 on his fastball because that's sexy and that gets people talking. But if he continues to do it in marquee spots like this, Blake, I actually don't think it's crazy to fast forward this out and say, if Bobby Miller is able to make 18 to 20 starts and the ERA is 2 something and he's striking guys out. I mean, none of that to me sounds quite as crazy as it did a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I agree. I think his biggest competition right now is going to be Corbin Carroll. He's having a really good year with the Diamondbacks, and he was the favorite coming into the year. And then, of course, James Outman could go on another run, and he had the hot month to start. So his numbers would be boosted a little bit if he does kind of pick it up more. But just with pitchers, like I think we've seen it in the past, they can just go on these runs and it just kind of boosts their stats for the whole year and makes them look really good. Like one that comes to mind was Jose Fernandez and Yasiel Puig, Rookie of the Year campaigns there. Yeah. Jose Fernandez had that incredible year, and a lot of people felt like Puig should win it, but Fernandez was just kind of on another level. And I kind of feel like we could see that with Miller and Carroll this year, where Carroll's going to be a really good player. It's just he might not have that same level that Miller gets to this year. So I'm kind of all in on Bobby Miller. He looks like an ace already, and it's been 3 starts. So it's a lot to be excited for there.
Yeah, I mean, 17 innings, 2 earned runs, just 9 hits allowed. He's striking out nearly a batter an inning, and I would almost expect that strikeout rate to improve as things go on. He had 7 today, so clearly his best start of the season today. And I want to kind of zoom out because as we talk about Bobby Miller, I joked earlier this week in a video that we did that Bobby Miller began the season as the Dodgers' number 9 starter. And I'm just basing that off of they had 5 guys. Pepio was clearly supposed to be the guy who filled in when Gonsolin went down. He didn't. So then Grove was number 7 because he stepped in. And then Gavin Stone got promoted before Bobby Miller did. Bobby Miller only gets promoted out of a necessity. And all of a sudden, Bobby Miller is here to stay. He's clearly not 9th on the depth chart anymore. But I think the biggest question for the Dodgers right now is what's the plan with the rotation moving forward? Noah Syndergaard was a guy who was in the rotation to begin the season. And look, you can't put it any other way than he's been a disaster as a starting pitcher. In his last 6 starts, he's allowed 26 earned runs in his last 29 1/3 innings. Over that stretch, he has allowed 40 base runners to reach base. Excuse me, he's allowed 40 hits, and he has struck out just 16 batters. You look at the StatCast stuff, 6th percentile expected ERA, 9th percentile whiff rate and strikeout rate. And the spin rate is bad. The velocity is bad. I mean, there's really, other than his ability to not walk people, everything has been bad for Syndergaard. And yet on the flip side, Julio Urias is out. And so with Bobby Miller and Michael Grove both in the rotation, there's still a spot for Syndergaard. So what do you make? We expect Julio Urias back in about a week, and then you'll have kind of 6 pitchers to choose from. And you've got Syndergaard, who you're paying a bunch of money and who can at the very least, eat innings. But then on the flip side, you've got a guy like Bobby Miller, who I don't know if the Dodgers necessarily penciled into his grooming plan for him to be throwing 5 to 6 innings at the major league level starting now and through the end of the regular season. There might be an innings limit at some point that he is on. So what would be your first move as far as navigating the Dodgers rotation once Julio Urias comes back?
I think the simple answer is to DFA Noah Syndergaard. Like you said,
Okay.
There's nothing really there. They haven't been able to fix him, and there's just not a whole lot of hope or upside left there. And if you listen to Syndergaard's quotes, he was basically just saying, like, I am the weak link on this team. It was kind of sad. He was very emotional with it. He said he would give up his hypothetical firstborn to be good again. And that's just a pitcher who is broken down. And from the human side, it's sad. But from a team and business side, it's about winning, and he's not producing. And you have 5 options who are better than him. But what I think the Dodgers will end up doing is optioning probably Michael Grove and keeping Syndergaard, because they do care about pitching depth. And I know that's not what people want to hear, but that's just how they tend to operate.
Yeah.
It wouldn't totally shock me if they just decide to move on and give it to their better options, because Dave Roberts said they were going to evaluate their options, and that meant what were they going to do with Syndergaard moving forward. They ended up keeping in the rotation kind of out of need, but they do prefer to have depth, and I think it might be I think they might value having him around just until the trade deadline when they can get another pitcher, because it didn't look like Gavin Stone's ready. It didn't look like, or Pepio probably won't be ready for a while, so they just don't have a lot of options. If someone else gets hurt, then you're kind of onto like the Matt Andriese, Robbie Erlin types, unless you're promoting someone from Double-A. And I'm not sure that's better than Syndergaard, even with how bad Syndergaard has been.
Yeah. We went through this earlier in the week, and I'll just summarize this. I think it's easy to just say, hey, DFA Thor and solves all your problems. He's terrible. And I would say there's kind of 2 problems with that. One is the Dodgers' current options make it difficult to do that. So right now they have Kershaw and Gonsolin, I would say, is kind of the 2 guys you feel really good about. Bobby Miller in that category, depending on what his innings limit is. So you've got 3 guys you feel good about. Then you got Michael Grove, who we'll get to in a moment, who I think belongs in the conversation and has established that he can at least be kind of a average or close to average major league pitcher, which is good enough for what the Dodgers need from like their number 5 starter, for example. Julio expected back next weekend from for the series with the Phillies. That's the hope, at least. I believe, right? Correct me if I'm wrong on that piece, Blake, but they're hoping Julio's back for the series against the Phillies.
Yeah, that's the hope.
Okay. So when Julio comes back, we're still only at 6 healthy starting pitchers. Dustin May on the 60-day, not expected to even pick up a baseball for 4 to 6 weeks. Pepio is out past the All-Star break. Gavin Stone, as you said, was the Dodgers' number 2 pitching prospect, thought to be the most major league ready. He was really bad. Like, he was worse than Noah Syndergaard bad. And you can't really argue with that because his ERA, I believe, is double digits, which Syndergaard's, as bad as he has been, is not in double digits. And so beyond that's kind of where you're stuck. And I would add to all that, the 3 guys I mentioned at the top of that list, Kershaw, Pepio, and Miller, none of those guys are people you feel great saying, oh yeah, we're going to get 18 to 20 starts from them from here on out. Like Kershaw spending a month on the injured list at some point would not surprise anybody. Gonsolin already has spent a month on the injured list. And so when you break it all down, they only have 6 healthy starters. And so DFAing Noah Syndergaard, while might seem like the obvious choice, it just leaves them very weak and very thin. So that's a long way, Blake, of me getting to the question of why not just put him on the injured list? He said it's really hard to make adjustments in between starts, make up an injury, say, hey, here's the deal. We don't want to DFA you. We want to keep you around. We would like to put you on the injured list, and we're going to put you on the injured list for 3 weeks. Maybe it's 4 weeks, pending everybody else staying healthy, and give you time to work through whatever you think you need to work through and see if you can figure something out. Why would that not be the best option for the Dodgers?
I think it's a viable option, and it might be something they consider, but I'm not sure how often they're actually lying about injuries. I know if the MLB Players Association caught them doing that, probably wouldn't go over too well. So if they kind of presented the option like that, might be some grievances filed there. But if Syndergaard says like something's wrong with me or I'm dealing with something here, then I think that would become a real option. I mean, yeah, I just don't know if they're gonna like straight up lie about the injury that way. It's just, yeah, I don't know.
You're just a big firm believer in the Dodgers telling the truth about injuries, huh, Blake?
Yeah, Dave Roberts is always really honest about them.
Super honest about things. Nobody was surprised to find out after the fact that Dustin May wasn't going to even pick up a baseball for 6 to 8 weeks after Dave Roberts said, I think they were hoping to have him back in 4 to 6. It was an amazing turn of events. Let's mention a couple other things. I want to talk about Grove. It is worth asking the question because this is what I get in my comments a lot, Blake, is there's somebody better. You mentioned Andriese and Erlin, a couple guys who are at AAA. It's worth pointing out those guys' ERA at AAA is about as bad as Noah Syndergaard's is at the major league level. So just assuming that you can't do worse from Syndergaard, like I'll just reject that premise out of hand. You can absolutely do worse than Noah Syndergaard. As bad as he has been, you can do worse. The other thing people say is, well, they've got this great rotation of guys down at AA. Why don't they just promote somebody from AA? They did it with Michael Grove. Yes, it was the only time Andrew Friedman's ever done it. But hey, I get in my comments like, look at the Braves. The Braves promote guys from AA. What do you think about those two options? Do you agree with my assessment that the Andriese Erlin options are actually worse options than Noah Syndergaard? And secondly, do you think it is too premature to start promoting, 23-year-olds from AA?
I would definitely go with the AA route before I go with Andriese or any of the AAA guys. Landon Knack looks really good, and he's probably the most major league ready of that group. So that's probably where I would go. They haven't done it. Like they've done it once, like you said, with Michael Grove. So I just don't see it as a realistic option. They'd probably want to see him in AAA first. But I also think he's like their emergency option if everything else goes wrong, and they just absolutely need innings.
Yeah.
It's just not a good spot with their depth right now with the injuries, and even with their healthy guys, they've had injury problems this year or in the past. So you don't want to just give up your depth this year. It's just not a good spot all around.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk Grove real quick to sort of close the loop on this, because I think Grove, I remember asking Daniel earlier in the week heading into the Yankee series, I said, hey, do you trust Michael Grove more or less than you trust Noah Syndergaard as a starter right now? And he basically put him in the same category. I had Grove a tick ahead of Noah Syndergaard. I left his start the other night on Saturday, Blake, really, really encouraged. 5 innings pitched, 4 earned is kind of the headline. But when you look a little deeper, he actually only allowed 4 base runners. All 4 of them happened to score. It was 2 home runs to Bowers. No walks, 7 strikeouts, 83 pitches, only 4 hard hit balls all day. That was the same amount that Garrett Cole allowed. And I think the biggest thing was the velocity. These were stats that I pulled from somebody on Twitter. I apologize for who, but in his 4 April starts, his fastball had averaged 93.9 mile an hour. Yesterday, his fastball averaged 96.4. In April, he had a 5.7% swing and miss rate on the fastball. Yesterday, he had a 21% swing and miss rate on his fastball. His slider has the 48% swing and miss rate on the season. So what did you make of Grove? Like, I would say I thought he got unlucky. I thought he pitched better than 5 innings, 4 earned run, kind of ends up telling the story. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I was actually impressed by him. His velocity on his fastball was up 2.5 miles an hour, and that's significant. Anytime a pitcher does that, I think he was sitting around 97 most of the outing.
Yeah.
As opposed to the 94 or whatever it was before. And he said it was due to some mechanical adjustments and possibly some adrenaline. But if he's going to come out throwing that hard and his slider looked good, like it's encouraging, and he could be more than I thought he would be if that's what he's going to be doing. So I'm excited for him. And yeah, he did look really good.
So for you, as we tie a bow on the starting pitching conversation, Julio comes back. You've clearly got Julio, Kershaw, and Gonsolin just penciled in for sure. Then you've got Grove, you've got Miller, you've got Syndergaard, and then take your pick of the guys at AA and AAA. It sounds like you think what they will do is send Grove down and leave Syndergaard into pitch, but what you would do was you would DFA Syndergaard.
Yeah, or if not, send one of them down, put one in the bullpen. I think Grove's stuff would play up there, and Syndergaard has some experience there last year, so maybe I would give him an opportunity to work on some things in short stints and kind of have longer stretches of not pitching. So that could be an option. It's just, I would DFA him, but I don't think the Dodgers are going to yet.
Yeah. I will say Dave Roberts' comments about Syndergaard we're like, hey, we're going to let him make one more start and then reevaluate, which is code for we're going to let him make one more start, then Julio's going to be back, and then our options will be greater than just they had to run him out there one more time. Like, they don't have a better option to pitch this week. And so I'll be really curious. I would, if I had to put a wager down, I think it's an injured list stint. His blister or back tightness, whatever they listed, whatever Phil Bickford went on the injured list with, give me the same diagnosis for Noah Syndergaard, because he said, hey, I'm trying to fix some things and it's really hard to do between starts. I'm not saying that's a reasonable excuse, but it's like, all right, well, if that's what you think, then let's give you a couple weeks off and you can go fix what you think you need to fix and see if it changes anything. We've got 5 starters for the meantime. And then in 3 weeks, if you want to give Bobby Miller a couple weeks off to save some innings for later in the year, Michael Grove, whoever it might be, at least you're in a better position. Then you'll know more about Pepio's timeline, Dustin May's timeline, etc. So that's kind of my expectation. And obviously, sorry, Kershaw is included in the group. I see some comments saying missing Kershaw. Yes, Kershaw is clearly in that group. So, I see, to a comment earlier. But yeah, so do you how do you feel about the Dodgers rotation right now? Would you describe yourself as concerned? You think they'll be fine? Desperately need a trade? Where are you at?
I'm concerned with it right now, but I think it has potential to be better or potentially even worse just because the injury problems we have talked about. So I think that's where my main concern comes from now. But if everyone was healthy, I wouldn't be concerned and I think they'd be fine. So I don't think they need to go burn it all down and go acquire a Corbin Burns type or anything, at least not at this moment. But there are some concerns with it.
It is interesting because what you just said, if the Dodgers are healthy, if you told me going into a postseason series that I had Kershaw healthy, I had Urias healthy, I had Gonsolin healthy, and I had Bobby Miller healthy, I feel really good about those 4. And even if Michael Grove is my 5th, obviously is Dustin May back, is Pepio back, like if people are healthy, I actually think it's a really good rotation. And if you could promise me that, I would say, hey, I don't think they need a trade. The problem is what they're used to having is like a 6 through 9 rotation on the bench somewhere down at AAA that they can just call up and say, hey, Mitch White, we need you to make a couple starts. And they're at the end of that rope. Like that was Michael Grove. That is Michael Grove. And he's now your number 4 starter. So that's the concerning piece, is they're putting a large bet at the moment on guys who have not proven they can stay healthy to be able to stay healthy, plus a rookie who we don't know what the innings limit could potentially be. Like, I don't foresee Bobby Miller making every start from here through the end of the playoffs, right? Like, and I'm not saying he's going to get injured. I'm saying even if he's healthy, I feel like we're going to get a 2 to 3 week shutdown just to keep the innings low.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think they're going to be cautious with him and not try and overuse him in his rookie year.
Yeah. So anyway, so I would say concerned is where I am. And it's not because of the top end talent. It's because of the depth. It's because I'm literally sitting here and saying, I don't think you can DFA today Noah Syndergaard, a guy who's been arguably the worst starting pitcher in baseball, because they just simply don't have better options. And that's the first time, I think, as a Dodgers fan in over a decade that I've had to say something like that. It feels like they always have a league average number 5 starter lurking somewhere. And this year they just don't. So let's move on from pitching. Let's get to our next segment here, Blake. And I like to call this segment buying or selling. And I know some folks in the chat are going to like a couple of the names on this list, but the premise of this segment is very simple. I'm going to give you a guy who's either on a hot streak or on a cold streak, and you tell me if you are buying or selling what you're currently seeing. So we'll start with JD Martinez, a guy who keeps hitting home runs everywhere he looks. A 173 weighted runs created plus in May. That was 100 is league average. He's at 173. I think he's hit 100 home runs in the last week and a half. I believe he leads the league in slugging percentage still, if he qualifies. Are you buying or selling that peak JD Martinez? Not like almost peak, but like maybe above his other peak, JD Martinez is back for the Dodgers.
I'm buying JD Martinez as a player and as a talented player on the team. I'm not buying that he's going to continue being peak JD Martinez. I just don't think it's possible for him to maintain this production for a long stretch of time, but he's definitely proven himself to be one of their better hitters, and I think that's going to continue throughout the year.
I should say, peak JD Martinez, you look back on some of his years. In 2017, in 120 games, he had a 376 on base percentage and a 690 slugging percentage. So his slugging percentage right now is 612. His on base percentage is about 75 points below that year. So he had a couple of years where he was better than this. But still, I mean, we're talking about a guy that, as it currently stands, has a 612 slugging percentage. I believe he's up to 14 home runs on the year, 621 slugging percentage, excuse me, as of today after another home run, but 14 home runs. So you're buying JD Martinez as a center of the lineup bat, the guy who is maybe not as productive as the guy that we're currently seeing, but probably closer to this version of JD Martinez than maybe the one who seemed to stumble a bit out of the gates.
Yeah, for sure. Like he's basically hit a home run every day in May, and I just don't think that's going to be able to continue. But he's
Hot takes from
definitely a
Blake
good
Williams.
player.
Will not hit
Yeah,
a home run
the
every
hottest
single
take.
day for the rest of the season. But I'm with you. I said all along this guy could hit. I wasn't expecting it to be this close to sort of peak JD Martinez. We're talking about a guy that last year he hit a weighted runs created plus of 119. I thought we'd be seeing a guy like that where I don't love the everyday DH, but I think he's going to hit well enough to say, to sort of justify it. The way he's playing right now, he absolutely justifies paying $10 million for a guy who can't play the field. Although, Blake, we did see him find his glove, go play a little left field tomorrow on Saturday. So, hey, maybe a couple of Will Smith games at DH, JD Martinez patrolling left field. What do you think, Blake?
I don't know. Do we think JD was borrowing a glove from Outman or someone else, or do we think he actually has one?
I don't know. He joked that he doesn't have one, so we'll see. Okay, next on this list, Chris Taylor. Buying or selling Chris Taylor, 142 weighted runs created plus in the month of May. Clearly, they're putting him in small specific situations. They're using him in platoons where it's to his advantage, but I have to give him credit. 142 weighted runs created plus in May. Are you buying a bounce back from Chris Taylor even if it's in a reduced role?
I'm going to sell it at that level. I think he'll be a fine platoon player, but he's just not passing the eye test at this point. And I know I'm going to probably get some trolls for bringing up the eye test, but he's been struggling for quite a while now. I was pretty optimistic with him before the season. I think a lot of people probably remember that. And you guys were all telling me I'm wrong for it. But I think I'm going to sell. He's more of a platoon player now, and I think that's fine. And I think he'll be fine as a platoon player. I'm just not buying a bounce back to like his pre-star level form.
Yeah. I mean, right now, I will have to say he's an above average offensive player, 105 weighted runs created plus. Like, I think that number, especially the way they're using him, just specifically in a platoon, basically, where he's absolutely mashing against lefties. I don't know if you've heard this, Blake. The Dodgers suck against lefties. So having a guy who hits lefties well and Chris Taylor is an advantage. Against lefties this year, he's hitting 275. He's got 7 home runs. That's in 56 plate appearances. So basically what it seems like they've done is just limiting him only to those situations, and he's producing. So I don't know. Again, I don't think he's going to end up at 145 as a weighted runs created plus sort of number, but I could absolutely seeing that number be like 120 because he's only playing, 1 out of every 3 games only against lefties. And look, I've been down on Miguel Rojas. And so if you're giving me opportunities for somebody else other than Miguel Rojas to play shortstop, then shout out to Chris Taylor for filling that role. Because if it's not going to be Mookie Betts, I would like it to be Chris Taylor as much as possible. Okay, next on this list, I know we've got somebody in the comments who's going to absolutely love this one because he's been begging for us to have this conversation for a long time. David Peralta, 115 weighted runs created plus on the season, in the month of May. The Dodgers had 4 hits today. 2 of them were David Peralta, including a double. Are you buying David Peralta sort of returning to this 110, 115-ish zone where he's an above average offensive player? He gives you really good defense in left field. And is that who he's going to be?
Yeah, I think I'm buying that because that's kind of what I expected before the year. He's not going to be a superstar. He's not going to hit a lot of homers, but he's going to be a solid hitter at the bottom of the lineup that's going to get you some singles here and there and some doubles here and there and be around 100 to 110 weighted runs created plus. He's just going to be a platoon guy, so that's going to help his numbers. And I don't think they need him to be anything more than just a contributor. Like, you don't need him to go out and be an MVP or an all-star type player. It's just what he is, and that's kind of what they're hoping for. And this is what he's been throughout his career, so I don't really see why that would change. And his numbers when he was slumping was still similar to his career numbers. So I think we're just kind of seeing the bounce back that was going to happen. And this is kind of just who he is.
Yeah. And I see TQT in here saying, hey, his stats are inflated due to always getting the platoon advantage. I mean, that's literally the Dodgers strategy in the outfield is always have the platoon advantage. Chris Taylor's only going to play against lefties. They're going to put these guys in situations to succeed. And as long as they continue succeeding and only being put into those positions, then I think it's going to continue to pay dividends for the Dodgers. I mentioned the defense. He's been really good defensively. I'd sort of seen some of those numbers, and defensive metrics are hard to sort of figure out what they're actually trying to tell you. But I would say, at least for me, Blake, I've been impressed with David Peralta defensively. So if you're getting a guy who's 15% above average offensively, which I think, again, he has been above average offensively in 7 of his 9 seasons in his career. They're going to put him in situations to succeed that, like the Diamondbacks, for example, couldn't. Like, they're only going to play him against teams and pitchers that he's going to hit well. And so I'm buying David Peralta here personally because of the offense and the defense. Are you in agreement that the defense for Peralta has been, were you expecting this from him?
Kind of, maybe not at this high level, but the Dodgers are good at putting their players in positions to succeed defensively with their positioning and all that. So yes and no. I mean, he's been very good out there though. Yeah, I'll agree with that.
Okay. All right. Next up is sort of a negative one here. We've gone positive with Martinez, Taylor, and Peralta. And I'm buying all three because Peralta and Taylor, I like the platoon advantage. I think they'll continue to get that. And I just think JD Martinez in the right situation is the type of guy who's going to probably be able to hit for the rest of his life. This next one, Blake, it hurts me to say out loud. And so I just want to confess that to you all right now. James Outman, 55 weighted runs created plus in the month of May. He has continued to look overmatched in the month of June. We knew a regression was coming. We knew the 1,000 OPS wasn't going to live forever with James Outman. I don't know if I saw the regression coming this hard and this quickly, though. Are you buying or selling this as a more accurate representation of who James Outman is?
I mean, can I say he's somewhere in the middle here? I don't think he's this bad, and I don't think he's as good as he was before. So I guess I'll buy that he's going to rebound and sell that he's going to get back to where he was in the first month. I mean, That's about as best as I can say it, because right now he's playing as like a AAA level player who should not be on the majors. And the first month of the season, he was an MVP type candidate. So I think if we go like somewhere right in the middle of there, I think that's fair probably for him moving forward.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where I'm at.
I mean, he was like, I think now, I mean, he was a week ago, let's say, he was at like 780 OPS. To me, that feels about right. And I think there are lots of young guys that even top prospects who come up and struggle, and Outman just happened to be the guy who had all of his success before all of his struggles. I mean, look at Miguel Vargas, who was a top 100 guy who everyone was like, he's going to hit. He hasn't quite figured it out. It probably looks worse for Outman, A, because it is worse, and B, because of the heights that he had and the expectation. He had raised his own level of expectation. So if I told you a 780 OPS and you had to take the over or the under, or I suppose because you could push, I guess, because you and Scott like to just play it right down the middle here. For Outman, rest of year from here on out, 780 OPS, would you take the over or the under?
I'd probably take the under, just because if we're talking about him as an 800 OPS plus guy, like that's going to be a really valuable player, and that's putting a lot of expectations on a rookie. So I'll say the under, and I still think he can be a valuable contributor if he's right around that area. And there's really nothing wrong with having that kind of player in your lineup, especially with the defense he's giving you. Yeah. So I wouldn't totally hit the panic button yet, but there is some concern there.
Okay. All right. Last one. And this is another guy that I have to be careful talking about, because every time I say something positive about this player, you could pretty much pencil him into a blow up. It is his birthday today, though, so we're going to be nice to him. Yency Almonte, 6 innings pitched. His last 6 appearances, 6 innings, just 1 hit, 1 walk, no earned runs, 7 strikeouts. If you look through his game log, it is pretty interesting, Blake, because it feels like, especially over the last month or so, he's basically been completely dominant, like no hits, no walks allowed in like 80 to 85% of his appearances. And then those 15% is like 2/3 of an inning, 4 earned runs. Like there's not like a bunch of 1 earned run games. It's like, hey, he hasn't allowed a hit in 2 weeks. And then it's like 4 earned runs the next time out. So are you buying that sort of Yency is refinding himself, the guy that we saw last year? Or are you selling this as a mirage that we've got a like 4 earned run performance coming to us sometime this week?
This one's tough because of like what you said, like he's looked amazing for stretches and then just blows up. So I think just me being me, I'm gonna sell a reliever here.
This was the easiest bet in the world that the Blake was gonna sell the reliever having a positive stretch of games.
Yeah, I just don't trust any reliever, and I don't think you can be an effective reliever if there's always the fear in the back of your mind that this could be the game he blows up. Like you can't trust him in big situations if he just keeps losing it every so often randomly. And it's not like he's just giving up 1 or 2 runs in his bad outings. Like he's legit not looking good and giving up 4 runs or something in the outing. So I'm just going to sell him. He could get back. He has good stuff, but I'm not sure it's going to happen this year just with how random relievers are.
I always said this year the difference between him and Vesia seemed significant to me because Yency had moments where you saw the stuff and you saw the 2-seamer and the velocity and the movement and you saw the sweeper and you're like, yeah, I get it. Like I get that if in some ways this might be a weird comparison, but it was kind of like watching Michael Grove the other day where it was like, yeah, he gave up 4 earned runs and he gave up a couple home runs and missed some really bad spots and got blown up. But you start seeing Grove throw 97, 98 mile an hour fastballs and then drop in the slider and you can see it in your mind. You're like, I get it. Now, when Grove was throwing like 94, it was a lot harder to see because you're like, what exactly, like, what's the path forward? What does the path to success look like for a guy? And that's the problem with Vesia is that when it's working, it never really seems to make sense because he's throwing like 95 mile an hour fastballs that nobody can hit. And yet with Almonte, at least when you're watching it and the sweeper looks good and the sinker looks good, you're like, oh yeah, that was 97 and it moved 6 inches this way. And then he threw a slider that moved 12 inches the other way. And so I kind of always will just gravitate towards those types of pitchers like Almonte, especially when he puts together these stretches of dominance. And so that's just my opinion. I'm not buying that he's going to be this great, but I think he could settle into like, I think last year was a mirage, but I don't think he's a guy I'd be DFAing anytime soon either. Because if you're selling Almonte, you're looking at the 7 ERA, and I would imagine you're not keeping this guy around for very long. He has no options. So if you're selling Almonte, Blake, is that like you don't think this guy's going to be on the roster in a couple of months? Or if you were in charge, he wouldn't be in the roster a couple of months? Or where are you at?
I'd keep him around for now. I don't think I'd DFA him. I just keep using him in lower leverage, middle relief type situations. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure who they would even call up at this point. Like the other options we saw, Wander Suero and Justin Brule, who is fine. He's just nothing special. They just don't have a lot of options right now. Like maybe at the trade deadline, if they get a reliever too, we might see Yency go. But right now, I think you kind of just have to hold him and use him in a more middle relief type role.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's funny that we're having a relief conversation today on Sunday because all the guys that you would normally have some degree of trust in seem to struggle a little bit. I mean, you look at the box score. I'm not including Graterol in that conversation, by the way, just for the record, but Evan Phillips gives up a run. Caleb Ferguson gives up 2 runs. And those are both guys who have been absolutely nails all season. And yet the bullpen, all 3 relievers that come in after Bobby Miller gives you 6 scoreless, all 3 allow runs. Graterol unearned only because of his own error. Can we mention, by the way, Blake, that is the stupidest piece of like box scores in all of baseball is that if a pitcher makes an error, it goes down as an unearned run. We need to change that. Graterol should get like 3 earned runs for the one that he caused by his own error.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird thing. Baseball has a lot of weird scoring rules. Like the one that always gets me is if a pitcher goes 3 innings to finish out the game, it's a save, even if it's like a 15-run lead. Like I don't know. Baseball has some weird stats.
The other one is, so a starter needs to go 5 to get a win. We know that. Normally, I just assumed that it's whichever reliever, like if Miller were to have gone 3 and leaves with a 6-0 lead, I just always assumed whoever comes in first for Bobby Miller gets the win. but there's actually like they just get to choose. They could just pick any reliever for the rest of the game that they kind of like deemed deserved the win or something. Like maybe I'm wrong on that. I'm pretty sure that's a rule. And I'm like, it's just bizarre that some guy somewhere is just like, oh yeah, Justin Brule. Yeah, 5th inning. He'd give that guy the win today. I don't know. Very weird. So, all right, let's get to some questions. Enough of the nonsense talk, or at least we'll just transition to a different version of nonsense talk. If you are new, please throw your comment in the chat with question, all caps, Ella Shiva. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but you did it great. So hang tight to that one. She asks, is Trace actually hurt? Trace Thompson with an oblique injury, tried to hold up on a swing, tweaked something, stayed in the game, left in the middle of the game. I do want to transition this to a conversation about the guy who came up, so we'll get to DeLuca here in a second. My answer to this is, I think if a guy gets removed in the middle of a game, it's a pretty safe bet that it's a real injury. So I think this is a real injury, that this isn't, especially because Trace Thompson, if they didn't fake the injury when he was 0 for a million, I don't think they'd fake it when he's actually gotten on base a few times in the last couple of weeks. So I'm going, yes, real injury here, Blake.
Yeah, he was hitting like 364 in his week before going on the IL. So it was like 11 at bats or something. But for him, like with what we've seen throughout the year, that's a very big accomplishment. So it just would have been a weird time to put him on the IL. And I don't think they would have promoted DeLuca already if they didn't have to, just because he just got promoted to AAA like 2 weeks ago or something. So I definitely believe he's actually hurt. And like you said, if they didn't do it earlier in the year, this just wouldn't have been the right time to do it.
Okay, let's talk DeLuca. I've been waiting 42 minutes and 46 seconds for this. DeLuca on paper, Blake, is everything I want. He's an Agora High School kid. I grew up right down the street. He and I grew up a couple miles away from each other. Then he goes up to Eugene, Oregon to attend the finest institution, the University of Oregon, where he plays baseball. 25th round pick in 2019. And basically they assumed it was kind of like he can run, he can field, and that was kind of it. Well, apparently the Dodgers know how to teach people how to hit and hit with power, because that's what DeLuca has done this season. A 142 weighted runs created plus in the minors. But the best part is this, Blake. If there's one thing DeLuca does, it's hit lefties. He had a 1,001 OPS against lefties last year. That number is up to 1,104 this year. He's a plus fielder in the corners, I'm told. He can play center field in a pinch. And oh, by the way, in his career, he has attempted 63 stolen bases and has been successful 58 times. So, I mean, we could have thrown this in the buying or selling, but are you buying Jonny DeLuca as a guy who might not just be a temporary answer to the Trace Thompson problem, but could be the outfielder who hits lefties that the Dodgers have been looking for?
It's possible. I'm not sure I bet on it yet. I feel like his long-term outlook is kind of like a platoon number 4 type outfielder. And I think that's where a lot of the scouts have him. I think he's like a 45 grade on the 20 to 80 scale, which is like right below league average, which puts him in that kind of bench platoon kind of role.
Yeah.
He has the skills you want to see in that kind of role. And he has obviously been tearing up the ball, but I'm just not sure, like, I'm going to bet on him to actually continue that at the major league level, just because baseball's hard at the end of the day. And even though he was mashing at AAA, like, the difference in talent is just significant. So until we kind of see it, I'm going to be pretty cautiously optimistic, I guess, on him.
I think you're underestimating the things you learned at the University of Oregon, Blake, and the rate of success that Oregon Ducks have in their future lives. So, and you could say you're not. We didn't play Bama, okay? In football, you can save your jokes for another person. All right, Blake.
I just mean, have you seen Tyler Anderson pitching this year? Because he might kind of take away from that University of Oregon hype train.
I saw him pitch last year, Blake, is what I'm talking about. Okay, Spencer Steer, Rookie of the Month, University of Oregon grad. Come at me, Blake. But one thing I'll say about DeLuca that's interesting is, and I don't mean these two players are identical, but their stories seem similar, is I see similarities to the James Outman trajectory. Like when DeLuca got protected on the 40-man roster, there were some people that were a little bit surprised. This isn't a guy who's on any top 100 prospect lists. I think he's already, like I said, he was a 25th round pick in 2019. And yet the projections, the people that say, oh, well, it'll fizzle out. He just hasn't fizzled out. So I'm with you. I don't think the Dodgers anticipated calling him up this quickly, but I'm excited to see. Because again, if he can be league average against left-handed pitching, which he's been well above that in the minor leagues, that would earn him a spot on the Dodgers roster for the rest of the season, especially if he can play plus defense in the corner. So I'm curious to see how this one plays out. Okay, let's get to some more questions here. Michael Carrillo asks, is it time to trade Brusdar Graterol? Should we get Daniel Starkin on the line and see if he wants to come in, our resident Brusdar Graterol defender?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the time to trade him. It was probably time to trade him a year ago. I think everyone's just kind of aware he is what he is. And we have to remember, like, if we want to trade a player from like the fan perspective, other GMs and executives are like seeing the same things and being like, well, they want to get rid of him for this reason, so why should we acquire him? I don't think Graterol has a ton of trade value just because he's essentially a middle reliever, kind of getting pushed into a higher leverage role just because the Dodgers lack those guys right now. So I'm not sure what they'd even get for him. Like, he seems like he'd be more of a throw-in with the team that's just like, hey, we need a reliever, so we'll take a chance on the guy who throws 100. Yeah, I just don't see any like viable trade that makes sense for both sides.
I agree with everything you just said. If you told me at the trade deadline that they made a move with like the Pittsburgh Pirates and Graterol ended up being, the third piece to that deal, I could totally see it because he's a guy that the new team could easily sell to their fan base. Hey, we've got this young reliever who's under team control for a couple of years. He throws 100 miles an hour, potentially our future closer. Like, that's an easy sales pitch, while as they're not banking on that for their job either. So I don't think they're going to trade him unless it's like the last piece needed to complete a bigger deal. They do have a bunch of arms that are going to be hopefully coming back at some point this year, but we'll see. David asks, what's your take on going 1-2 against the Yankees? Is this a big deal or no deal, Blake?
Could have answered this at the beginning, but I went with no deal there.
Yeah.
I mean, the Yankees are a good team. They're not even in our division or league, so it's just, there's not a whole lot of stock to put into it. I don't think the Dodgers didn't have their top of the rotation guys going besides Kershaw.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like they got caught at a bad time after a long road stretch coming back home. And yeah, I'm not putting any stock into it really.
What's interesting to me is if I would have told you I had 3 questions heading into the Yankees series, looking back, I would say all 3 of those questions we got good news from. So Kershaw struggled in the month of May. Is he going to be okay? He looked great on Friday. Michael Grove, can he be an answer and is a better alternative to Noah Syndergaard? He was great, I thought. I mean, great maybe relative to expectations. He was very good, I thought, on Saturday. And then the third was Bobby Miller. Is this the real deal? So yes, I know they went 1-2, but Kershaw, Grove, and Miller giving the performances that they did, I felt like outweighs any negativity for me that comes with having lost 2 of those games. Just me. TQ2 asks, Enos Harris ranked his starting pitchers for the rest of the year recently. Urias ranked around 45. Is he the number 2 that I thought he was, or did Eno underrate him? I like Enos Harris. Enos Harris's big thing is stuff, which I think is legit. I just have always said, and I'm not trying to be the Matthew Moreno of the of this chat where it's like you pick some numbers and go with the eye test on others. I think there are some guys, Urias being one, I would add Tony Gonsolin to this category, that for whatever reason, they consistently are outperforming whatever the predictive stats say they should have done. Obviously, this year, Julio has struggled. But so, like, Julio's not going to grade out well, I don't think, on Enos Harris's, like, stuff metrics, which is the probably the most important thing he's using to evaluate pitchers moving forward. So I tend to think Julio is very good. I think even, depending on how we're defining number 1s and number 2s, like if we're saying, hey, there's 30 teams, so therefore the top 30 pitchers are all number 1s, then I think Julio Urias is a number 1 pitcher in Major League Baseball. If we're saying there's only like 7 or 8 true number 1s in the league, then I definitely think he would be in the number 2 category. That's me. I know that's a tough argument to make today with the way that Julio has looked in 2023. But I think the longer track record of the last 4 or 5 years speaks more loudly to me than some struggles this year.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with what you said. It depends how you kind of define 1 and 2s. I think he is closer to a number 2 than a number 1 by the traditional like standards that people think of. Like, he's not a DeGrom, he's not a Corbin Burns, he's not a prime Kershaw type pitcher, but he is very good. And I still feel like even if he is ranked 45, and then that's also like a number 2, like if you're looking at that's the top 60 pitchers in baseball, or the top 2 there.
Yeah.
So number 2 does seem fair for him, and around 45 also seems fair. And he hasn't been great this year. I'd bet on him to rebound a bit, but yeah, I do think his ranking is fair, and also that him being a number 2 is fair.
Yeah, I think 45 is way too low. That's just my perception there. I would have him in the top 30 for sure. Okay, let's try to hit a couple of these quick. Nicholas asks, how sustainable do you believe the offense is? They've been really good almost all season, didn't show up after inning 1 on Friday. Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, Will Smith, JD Martinez, are all 4 of those guys are at the top of basically every offensive category. You could include Max Muncy, who's among the top home run hitters in the league. Besides that, there have been questions. Jason Hayward has been good. Peralta has been good of late. Outman has struggled. Miguel Vargas still seems to be trying to figure some things out. So do you believe the Dodgers, who currently, I believe, lead the National League in runs, are you buying that as something that could continue for the rest of the year?
Yeah, I buy it because of their top in talent. I mean, their top 1 through 4 or 5 is up there with anyone in baseball. And there's not a single lineup that has a strong lineup 1 through 9. So, yeah, you can bring up like Miguel Rojas and Austin Barnes and David Peralta and Chris Taylor, and all those guys are getting consistent playing
Some of those
time.
guys do not belong in the same category of other players. Let's be fair here.
Yeah, but those are the people like that tend to get the complaints. So that's what I'm going with there. But those are the guys, like, they're going to hit at the bottom of the lineup, and every team has those type of players. Like, no one has 9 stars in their lineup on a nightly basis. So the Dodgers lineup is very good, and I think it can compete with any lineup in baseball, especially because their top 1 through 5 is just near the best in the league.
Yeah, I'm buying the crap out of the Dodgers offense. Like Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Will Smith, JD Martinez, Max Muncy. That's probably the best 1 through 5 that any team could boast. I mean, I know the Padres on paper may be able to put together a better, group, but those 5 are incredible. I think Jason Hayward, like Chris, in the situations he's being put into, I think he'll continue to be some degree of successful and above average offensive player. I think Peralta, Taylor, above average offensive players. Miguel Vargas, I think, will develop into an above average offensive player. Like, my point is, I think you could put a lineup out there where all 9 players are above average offensively. And oh, by the way, the 1 through 5 are like 5 of the top 25 hitters in all of the sport. I think that's like a realistic outcome for the Dodgers. In some ways, you could say, hey, once we start getting less Austin Barnes, if we ever get less Austin Barnes, if Miguel Rojas plays less and Chris Taylor plays more, like I actually think you could make a case there's room for improvement in some of these categories. We both think Miguel Vargas is going to be better than what we've seen from him thus far. And so Peralta's trending in the right direction. Hayward's trending in the right direction. I just think that, yes, I think the Dodgers offense is sustainable. I think you can make a case that it being the best in baseball would not be surprising. All right, Vinicius, how many more chances does Bickford have left? Do you guys see him being on the roster come October? I want to say 2 things about Bickford, Blake, then I'll let you share. One is the Dodgers absolutely blew out this guy's arm a couple weeks ago when they made him throw 100 pitches. He performed admirably, and he deserves a lot of credit for that. You can draw a line from that moment to him being awful ever since then. I don't know why it took so long for him to get the phantom IL stint that I think he is currently getting. I hope he gets 2 or 3 weeks off and then gets a fair chance to prove himself again. That said, I don't think he's on the roster come October. They've got a lot of relievers that are due to get healthy at some point, and I think Bickford, with no options remaining, is very clearly at the back end of the guys who are currently healthy.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think they're going to move on from him anytime soon, but I don't see him as one of their October pitchers. And if he is, something would have had to go very bad, or Bickford would have had to have been really good since coming back. So I'm not going to say they're going to move on from him, but I just don't think he's in their long-term plans either.
Yeah. Okay, TQT wants to ask me a question. I brought up DeLuca's name as an option a month ago. Jeff laughed at bringing up a guy from AA. Why is he now loving DeLuca after a month in AAA? A, he's an Oregon Duck. That helps his cause. And B, I believe the conversation we were having was pitchers moving from AA to major leagues, which I think is a completely different conversation. I always said I had DeLuca as way closer to the major leagues than Andy Pages. I think he was clearly always the outfielder who was ever going to get brought up if Michael Busch wasn't a guy they trusted there. So I think we're combining a couple conversations there is just is my perception there. Yeah, there we go. Now I'm scrolling through. I'm late on the comments because I have to stick with where we are in the questions. And now I'm seeing comments about Cam Newton in the title game against Oregon. And that was where I thought you were going to go, Blake, when we first started talking about this. But there we go. Okay.
I can't brag about Auburn.
Yeah, I knew that's what I was about to tell you. And he cheated too. Cam Newton did. And also Michael Dyer was down in that game. Okay. Robert asks, do you think Gavin Stone would be shipped off at a package for a guy like Hunter Green or Shane Bieber? Both of those two guys seem unlikely to get moved, is just my guess. But let's focus on the first part here, Blake. Go ahead.
I think there is an ESPN report saying executives believe Bieber is going to be available. So That's probably where that's coming from. I don't think Hunter Green would be traded or have really any chance of that happening.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So what do you think about, like, do you think Gavin Stone is a trade candidate? It feels to me like you'd be selling as low as you possibly could on Gavin Stone. That would be my only hesitation. The flip side is, some guys, let me preface this. I'm not saying this about Gavin Stone. There have been lots of players throughout history who have reached the highest levels of the minor leagues with incredible prospect pedigree and incredible expectations. And for whatever reason, when you become a Major League Baseball player, it just doesn't work for you. I'm not saying that's going to be Gavin Stone. I'm saying it's possible the Dodgers saw something in the 3 or 4 starts that have them more concerned about him than they were a couple months ago. I don't think that's likely. I'm not saying that personally. I'm throwing it out as a hypothetical as to why they might consider moving Gavin Stone, even though his stock is lowest. So with all that, do you think Gavin Stone could potentially be in a trade package, or do you think he would be kind of on an untouchable list for the Dodgers unless it was a Shane Bieber type?
I think it depends on the player. I think they'd still lean toward no on most players, but if you can go get a Shane Bieber or a Corbin Burns or even Shohei Ohtani, which probably isn't going to happen, I don't think they're going to stop making that trade because of Gavin Stone, but they're not going to move him in a deal for someone like Lance Lynn or someone to the lower level like that. So
yeah,
anyone's tradable in the right deal. And I think the Dodgers would love to have Shane Bieber in their rotation right now, and it probably would take someone like Gavin Stone to get it done.
Yeah, with all due respect to Lance Lynn, by the way, there we don't. It's just like strays.
America's ace. Over
there. There you go. DKM, any update on Dustin May? Will his elbow require surgery? There was a report recently that they considered surgery. I believe he's still on a not touching a baseball for the next 4 to 6 weeks timeline and then being reevaluated. So anything I'm missing there?
No, that sounds about right, unless Dave Roberts just isn't telling us the full report, and he might not have an arm at this point with all we know, but yeah.
El Shiva asks, is there a strategy that can be used so that Will Smith gets to DH a bit more? Yes. JD Martinez playing left field, Blake, tell them.
Yeah, I don't think I'm doing that. I'm not sure that's worth it.
Okay, let's get to see if we have any more questions. You could start throwing some food ones. I saw one was, if Bobby Miller invited you to eat at IHOP, would you eat at IHOP? I feel like I know the answer here.
Is he gonna pay for it?
Oh my gosh, are you serious? That's your response?
Yeah, if he's paying for it, I'll go, but I'm not spending my own money at IHOP.
If Bobby Miller invited you to IHOP and said, "Hey Blake, just a heads up, I rookie pay scale, I've got a lot of people I owe some money to, so I can't cover it, but I'd love to just grab dinner with you at IHOP," you would say, "Sorry, I'm good."
That rookie pay scale is still like $300,000 a year after taxes.
It's more than that.
So,
yeah.
No, it's like $500,000, I think, or somewhere around there, and then with taxes and agent fees and player association fees, I think he can afford to give me some IHOP if he wanted to go to IHOP with me.
Jeez Louise, that's unbelievable. I can't believe that was your answer to that question. Man, one thing. This was a question from Twitter. A couple questions. This was from Mark. In June, oddly enough, the Dodgers have every Monday off. How do you think that plays into the rotation with Julio coming back, the Syndergaard thing, a possible 6-man rotation, etc.? Do you think that's an opportunity to reset or to rest people? So just an interesting scheduling quirk that they've got every Monday off this month. Do you think that changes anything as far as how they approach the starting rotation?
I think they're just going to use them as rest days to get their guys some extra days. we've talked about how all their guys in the past have had injury issues or they're going to be on a limited pitch count this year. So I don't think they're going to like try and push anyone up or mix around the rotation at all. They're just going to see it as nice days to get them some rest.
Yeah. Okay. One other from Twitter. Dodger Jim asks, why are they reluctant to bring back Michael Busch? He's great and what we need. He's versatile, can hit, run, play some positions. It wasn't like they sent him down because he was bad. Bring him up. Bring him up. I know he has struggled of late. I haven't looked recently, but I don't think the last couple of weeks for him have been very good. The other news that I see people in the comments mentioning, Andy Pages, who is the other prospect who's on the 40-man roster, torn labrum, I believe. And so he's out for the entire season. So bad news for the Dodgers prospects there. Although I don't think Pages was a guy that I would have expected up at any point this season. So Michael Busch, do you think he's a guy who kind of deserves to be on the outside looking in right now based on where the Dodgers roster is at?
I think he deserves to be on the roster, and he would probably be on the roster for any other team in baseball if he was one of their prospects. But I'm not sure where the Dodgers would play him right now. Like, he can play first base, but he's blocked by Freddie Freeman there. I don't think they're going to sit Miguel Vargas to play him there. They're not going to sit Muncy to play him there. Yeah. I don't think they want to use him in left field, even though he has some experience there. So I'm just not sure what the answer is. He's not going to DH over JD, and I don't think they want him to just sit on the bench.
Yeah. Okay, last question here. Nicholas, this is a good one. We're 35-25 with all these injuries and pitching issues. How confident does that make you for this team post-deadline when we make some trades and guys come back? The optimistic part of me would say you could make a case that some of the best relievers the Dodgers have in the organization are all guys who are currently injured. I think Blake Treinen, if he's healthy, Fire Eisen, if he's healthy, Alex Reyes, if he's healthy, are all three guys who become back-end potential options. On the starting rotation side, Dustin May was good. He's out. Julio Urias, their number one starter, has been out. Even Ryan Pepio, their number 6 starter, has been out. On the offensive side, I would say they've been pretty fortunate. I don't think, they haven't missed, other than Will Smith missing some time. They've been pretty fortunate there. But with all that said, and the expectation that they're going to go out and make some trades, whether it's for a corner outfielder who can hit, whether it's for a starting pitcher, do you feel optimistic? Do you have confidence about how this team plays out, given what they've been able to do, given the circumstances so far?
Yeah, I'm optimistic. I think it's kind of hard not to be with how they've been playing overall this year. They've dealt with some injuries in their pitching staff, like you mentioned. And if they're healthy, they're one of the top teams in baseball, if not the top. They're going to be competing with the Rays and the Braves for that spot. But I think they can compete with both those teams easily. And as we've seen every year in the postseason, like, you just have to get in and then anything can happen. Like, that's when Eddie Rosario turns in from a bench player to Babe Ruth, and maybe the Dodgers have some guy that can do that this year, and you just never know. It's just, there's so much randomness in it, and the Dodgers definitely have the talent to compete. So you got to kind of be optimistic at the very minimum.
Yeah, I think how they've performed, given guys that you're expecting to come back at some point, given the expectation that they can make a trade for somebody to help on the pitching side, somebody to help on the offensive side, I think there's reason for optimism. Let me throw one more question at you, Blake. It's one of mine, not a food question. Don't worry. Without trying as hard as you can to avoid the platoon piece, which I know is a massive part of this, but imagine you had to come up with the best lineup for the Dodgers, offense, defense, all of it included. And it was a mystery whether you were going to be facing a lefty or a righty. You just had to put your best 9 guys out there in positions that make sense. I want to go around the diamond with you and just see if there's differences between our two lineups. So catcher, obviously, we're both going with Will Smith. First base, we're both going with Freddie Freeman. Second base, I'm still going with Miguel Vargas. Is Miguel Vargas, in a best case scenario for the Dodgers as currently constructed, is Miguel Vargas still your second baseman?
Yeah, I think so. He has like a 110 weighted runs created plus. They're right around there this year. I don't think there's anyone who's going to be better than that, especially if you don't know if it's a lefty-righty platoon.
Yeah. Okay. Third base, Max Muncy. We both agree there. Designated hitter, JD Martinez. We both agree there. I think the interesting ones come down to the shortstop, right fielder, center fielder, and left fielder. So give me what you could start wherever you want to on that group. What position do you want to start with for this conversation?
We can start at shortstop since we have the whole infield, and then we can just do one big outfield conversation, basically.
I'm not trolling when I say this. I would put Mookie Betts at shortstop. I think he's their best option. I think offensively, he allows you to put the best 1 through 9 lineup you possibly can out there. I think defensively, everything we have seen from him, not only at shortstop, but at any position, is that he is an intelligent player who can play some defense. I'm not saying he's as good as Miguel Rojas. He's not even close to as good as Miguel Rojas. I think he's at worst an average defensive shortstop. And because of the improvements that you get offensively elsewhere by removing Rojas, I've got Mookie Betts as my shortstop. In like, I need to win a game. I don't know who's on the mound. I have Mookie Betts at shortstop. Who do you have at shortstop?
I think I'd probably still go with Miguel Rojas right now, just because he's going to give you, like Dave Roberts said, he's the best defender in baseball right now. And I do think that has value at shortstop, especially with how some of their pitchers have been kind of struggling and they've had some injuries in their rotation and their bullpen. So I do think the defense is valuable there. And I'm not sure the offense from like a David Peralta is going to outweigh that defensive value. And Rojas has been fine recently hitting. Like, he's not a star. I don't even think he's average yet, but he's been fine enough to the point where I'm going to take that defense there.
It's a wide definition of fine. We'll leave that one alone for now because we're at the end of the show. So you've got Mookie in right field then. What other two outfielders are you going with?
I'm still going with Outman.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm going with Hayward and Outman. Hayward has just looked really good all year. He's hitting the ball hard. He's playing good defense. Like, when we're ignoring if there's a lefty or a righty on the mound, I do think Hayward is the best option, like just talent-wise there right now. And then like Outman's my other guy just because I'm believing in the true talent level. But this all does mix up when we start considering platoons and all that. Like, if there's a righty on the mound, I'm putting David Peralta in my lineup, and I'm probably taking Rojas out of the lineup. So
against the
you
righty,
do have
you're
to
moving
consider
Mookie
that.
Betts. You're moving Mookie Betts to shortstop.
Yeah, I would have Hayward in right and Peralta in left against a righty, and put Mookie at shortstop. But if we don't know the pitcher and anything, I'm just going to take the defense and not risk having Peralta or Hayward in the lineup against a lefty.
And so real quick, against the lefty, you wouldn't start Chris Taylor ahead of Rojas?
I would put Taylor in the outfield.
Okay. Yeah, I think under this exercise, I think Hayward to me is the clear one. And then I think it gets really interesting because of the direction that two guys are headed when it comes to Outman versus Peralta. In my case, because I've got Mookie Betts at shortstop, I can put Peralta and Outman in the outfield and feel good about it. Like we talked about, I think Chris Taylor's an option if we're playing against a lefty out there as well. And so to me, that's where it comes down to is like, I think it's a Peralta versus Rojas, Outman versus Rojas is kind of the interesting conversation because of Mookie's ability to play some shortstop. You could add Chris Taylor to that conversation depending on the platoon. So it's just an interesting conversation. I love to look at the lineup and figure out like, okay, what are we doing here? I've joked Austin Barnes and Miguel Rojas should never be allowed in the lineup at the same time. Unfortunately, it happens more than I think it should. But I think all of this is my way of saying there's a lineup out there that the Dodgers can put together if they need to that's really freaking good offensively, like where there's no weak spots. And worst case scenario, they're going to put together 8 guys out there that are really freaking good. And either Rojas or Barnes or somebody is going to be the 9 hitter. And you can just live with it. Like, I don't think it's the end of the world if your 9th hitter is terrible. I think most teams in the league probably have an 8 hitter who's terrible. So that's where I'm at with the Dodgers. I think at the very least, it's an interesting conversation. So we'll leave it there. I appreciate all the folks hopping in. Go ahead, Blake. You got one more thing.
Yeah. So there's a question that said, will someone make a trade for a relief pitcher, or are they going to count on guys to return? And I just kind of wanted to answer that by saying they tried to wait on guys to return last year and it did not work out. So I think they have a lot of talent that could come back, but I don't think you can bet on that. So I would definitely go out and make a trade for a reliever or two.
Okay, there you go. It depends. I mean, if a month from now we still have no clue on Reyes and Fireisen and Trinan, I think that you make a great point. I think if there's a reasonable, because I would say the bullpen, I don't know. I don't hate the bullpen right now. I'll put it that way. I might be in the minority there. I don't hate the bullpen. So worst case scenario, if this is the group we've got to go with, I think Phillips and Ferguson and the way that some of those other guys have looked, Gonzalez, even Graterol at times, Almonte, yada, yada, yada. I think you could patch it together. So, but it's a great question. So thanks for bringing it up. So Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thanks for joining us here. Dodger Heads presented by DodgerBlue.com. Check out DodgerBlue.com. You can follow us on social media, DodgerBlue1958. And please, if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe, ring the notification bell. We would greatly appreciate it. You can find Blake at @ByBlakeWilliams on Twitter. He and Matthew Moreno, credentialed reporters. So whenever there's home games, getting tons of great content inside the clubhouse as well. So make sure to give him a follow. That is Blake. My name is Jeff. As always, enjoy the rest of your night. And of course, go Dodgers.